The wind rolled across the plains with that dry, gritty whisper only the frontier could make, brushing against the old boards of the barn like a tired traveler asking for shelter. I had been up since before dawn, boots crunching through frost, breath coming out in pale threads that floated in the open dark. Most mornings, I didn't expect company, never had reason to. Life out here was a quiet sort of punishment, and I took it like a man determined to carry the past on his own shoulders. But that morning, the quiet wasn't right. Something in it felt off, like the land itself was holding its breath. At first, it was just a sound, soft, too soft to be a stray animal, a faint rustle, a muffled gasp, then another. My hand tightened around the barn door latch, as if it might jump out and bite me. I lifted the lantern, letting its dim yellow glow dance across the wooden walls, and pushed the door open slow enough to keep from giving myself away. The smell of hay drifted out warm and familiar, but there was something else under it. Smoke, faint but real. I stepped inside, boots sinking softly in the straw, and the lantern flame flickered as if nervous. That's when I heard it clear, a small whimper. A child's. My blood tightened. Who's in here? My voice came out rough. A low growl that years of silence had shaped into something neither friendly nor cruel. I took another step, then froze. A woman sat against the far wall, wrapped around two children like a shield made of bone in desperation. Her head lifted toward the sound of my voice, but her eyes, pale, clouded, didn't find me. They drifted, unfocused, searching for a world they couldn't see. She was blind. Her hands trembled, but she held the children tighter. The youngest, a boy no more than 7, pressed his face into her shoulder. The older, maybe 10, glared at my silhouette like he'd fight me if he had to. "Please," the woman whispered. "We'll leave at first light. Just let them rest." Her voice was thin, worn down by fear and cold. And even though I'd been planning to tell whoever had broken into my barn to get out before I dragged them out, the words died in my throat. The lantern light slid across their faces, revealing dirt, soot, and bruises that didn't come from running through the woods. Clothes torn, skin scraped raw. And the woman, she smelled like she'd been near fire. "What happened to you?" I asked. She didn't answer. The kids didn't move. Their silence felt practiced. I set the lantern down gently. "You hungry?" The young boy coughed, a brittle, rasping sound that cut through the cold. That was all the answer I needed. I brought them water first. The boy gulped it down like someone who hadn't tasted anything clean in days. The older child held the cup steady for him. The blind woman kept her hands folded in her lap, fingers twitching like she was memorizing every breath her children took. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of miles traveled without rest. "My name is Alara," she said softly. "These are my sons, Kalen and Finn. Where's your home?" I asked. "Gone." The word trembled in the air, fragile as a spider thread. Little by little, the boys added pieces. Their cabin had burned in the night. Smoke had filled the rooms. They'd run barefoot into the freezing dark. Someone had chased them, men, more than one. They didn't know who. They didn't know why. But the oldest boy said something that stuck with me like a splinter under the skin. Ma heard one of them say they were supposed to bring us back alive. Alive. Not safe. Not unharmed. Just alive. Alara flinched when he said it. Her fingers tightened around the hem of her dress, knuckles white. "We shouldn't trouble you," she murmured. "We only meant to rest for a few hours. We'll move on." Move on where? I snapped before I could stop myself. "You can't see. The boys are half frozen, and there's men after you?" She tilted her face toward my voice. "We'll manage." "Like hell you will." But even as I said it, I remembered why I didn't want strangers on my land. People talked. People judged. And I'd had enough of that in town to last a lifetime. Ever since the day I failed someone I was meant to protect, the town had looked at me like a broken fence post. Still standing, but not much use to anyone. Before I could say more, a shadow moved past the barn window. A rider. Slow. Watching. I snatched up the lantern, blew it out, and pressed a finger to my lips. The woman stiffened. The children huddled close. We waited, breath locked in our chests, until the hoofbeats faded into the distance. but the cold knot in my gut didn't ease. That rider hadn't been passing through. He'd been looking. I turned back to Alara. You stay. All of you. She shook her head. We don't want trouble following us to your doorstep. Too late. I muttered. It's already here. We sat in the barn for a long stretch, the dark pressing against us like a second hide. The children finally drifted into a stiff, exhausted sleep, their heads resting against their mother's shoulders. Ilara leaned back against the wall, chin lifted slightly, listening for what her eyes couldn't catch. There was something strong about her, a quiet, resilient shape not by choice but necessity. You didn't tell me everything, I said quietly. Her jaw tightened. You weren't just running from a fire. No, she whispered. But knowing the rest won't change what happens now. Try me. She hesitated, then let out a long, shuddering breath. A man came to our cabin 3 weeks ago. Rolf Bramer. The name was enough to make my blood run stiff. Bramer was known across the territory. Violent, ambitious, hungry for land that wasn't his. He didn't take no kindly. He wanted us off our land, Ilara continued. Said he had a claim. I told him he was mistaken. That man doesn't take rejection well. I know. 2 nights later, our windows were smashed. A week after that, our water barrel was poisoned. Then came the fire. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. And he wants the boys? Her voice cracked. He said they'd fetch a price. A price. The frontier had many horrors. That was one of the worst. I rose from the hay and walked to the barn door, peering through a crack in wood. The land outside was washed in pale dawn. Snow dusted the plains. The world looked quiet again, but I'd lived long enough to know quiet was just another word for danger catching its breath. You're safe here, I told her. She tilted her face toward me. Why would you risk yourself for strangers? I didn't answer right away, because the truth wasn't something I liked to revisit. Once, years back, I'd been too slow to step in, too stubborn to see danger until it tore through someone who trusted me. After that, I'd built my life around solitude. Walls high enough to keep the world out, thick enough to keep my guilt in. But looking at that blind mother sitting on the cold barn floor, holding her 2 trembling sons, something inside me shifted. Maybe walls weren't meant to last forever. Maybe some people were worth breaking them for. You're staying, I said firmly. Ilara lowered her head in weary acceptance. And for the first time in years, I felt like the choice I made was the right one. When the sun finally crept over the horizon, turning the frost into a dull shimmer, I opened the barn door slowly, rifle slung across my shoulder. The plains were still, but tracks, fresh tracks, cut across the dirt road leading north. Big boot prints. Heavy. Too many to belong to someone passing by. Those men would be back. And when they came, they'd find I wasn't the same man they expected. Not anymore. The morning broke colder than any in recent memory, a sharp wind slipping between the boards of the cabin, as if trying to pry secrets loose. Elena woke before the children, her breath fogging faintly in the air, her body aching from the night's unrest. She hadn't slept well, not after the stranger's warning, not after the way he'd looked at her when he said riders were coming. She knew that look. She'd seen it on men who'd already buried too many. Silas stood outside the cabin when she stepped onto the porch. His hat was low over his eyes, his coat flapping lightly in the wind. The man hadn't slept. She could tell by the tightness in his jaw, the shadows under his eyes, and the way his hand kept brushing the butt of his holstered coat as though checking it was still there. Tracks? She asked quietly. He didn't turn. 2 riders, maybe 3, moving slow last night, cutting across the flats. Figure they camp a mile out. Her stomach nodded. Yours. If they were mine, they'd be here already. His voice was low, edged with something she couldn't name. Anger, regret, maybe a little fear. What do they want? She whispered. Silas finally turned to her. The same thing every man wants when he comes searching with guns and no name to give. Her heart dropped. Blood. Mine, he said softly. And anyone standing near me. Before she could answer, Jesse stepped outside, rubbing sleep from his eyes, dark hair mussed. The boy glanced between them, reading tension like he'd been forced to do too many times already. Ma, what's wrong? Elena mustered a smile. Nothing, sweetheart. Go wake Ruth. Silas watched the boy go, jaw tightening again. You need to take the kids and ride into the ridge trail. By midday, it'll buy you time. She shook her head. I'm not leaving my home. Home? Don't mean a damn thing if you're dead. Her chin lifted stubbornly. Then you shouldn't have brought trouble here. Silas stiffened. A long silence stretched between them. When he finally spoke, it was quiet, heavy. I didn't bring trouble. Elena, trouble was already following me. I just stopped long enough for your kids to put a coffee cup in my hand and remind me I ain't a ghost yet. His voice cracked on the last word, and she saw something raw beneath the grit. A man who'd been chased so long he didn't know how to stop. Elena stepped closer, lowering her voice. Then don't run today. Silas looked down at her, searching, almost startled. You don't know what you're skinned. I know I'm skin you to act like the man my children think you are. That landed like a blow. Silas turned away sharply, swallowing hard. The wind shifted. Hoofbeats whispered from the distance. They both heard it at the same time. By late morning, the land stretched silent and tense beneath a gray sky. The riders hadn't shown themselves yet, but Silas felt them closing in, the way a man senses a rattler in the brush before he sees it. He'd spent the last hour reinforcing the barn doors, stacking crates, dragging tools, setting up firing lines and fallback points. He'd moved with the efficiency of a man who'd built defenses in a dozen different towns and survived them all barely. Elena watched from the doorway, her hands clenched at her sides. Ruth, 7, clung to her skirt wide-eyed and quiet. Jesse stood near Silas, eager but uncertain, desperate to prove he wasn't a child. Silas crouched to meet the boy's eyes. You ever fired a rifle? A couple times. Then you'll stay with your ma. You hear me? Jesse bristled. I can help. Help by keeping them safe. That's a man's job, same as shooting. Jesse swallowed hard, then nodded. Silas ruffled his hair. The boy's shoulders straightened as though the touch had knighted him. Elena met Silas's gaze. You don't have to stand alone. I always stand alone. You don't have to. His throat worked, but he didn't answer. Instead, he moved past her toward the corral. Elena followed. There, tethered the fence, stood Midnight, the black stallion everyone assumed was the deadliest thing Silas owned. The horse was tall, scarred across the flank, with eyes as sharp and intelligent as the man beside him. Silas stroked the horse's neck gently. Midnight leaned into him. You gonna ride out? Elena asked. No. Then why ready the horse? Silas didn't answer at first. His jaw tightened. His shoulders stiffened. Finally, because if I fall, he'll know where to take you. Elena stared at him. Shock, anger, something softer woven through. Stop talking like you're already dead. Most men hug me like I am. I'm not most men. You ain't a man at all. She stepped closer, her voice fierce. Then maybe you should start listening. For the first time, Silas's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Almost. Then he froze. The wind dropped. The birds scattered. A single echo rolled across the plains. A rifle shot. Silas grabbed Elena and dragged her behind the water trough as another shot cracked, splintering the side of the barn. Ruth screamed. Jesse pulled her toward cover. Silas peeked over the trough. 3 riders, dark coats, bandanas pulled high, galloped over the ridgeline, rifles raised. They were closer than he expected. Too close. Elena's heart hammered. Who are they? Silas's voice was a rasp. Men who'd rather see me buried than breathing. He drew his coat. Stay low. He moved like a shadow, sprinting for the barn as bullets chewed into the dirt behind him. Elena felt every heartbeat like a hammer strike as she watched him die behind a stacked crate, roll, and fire once. One rider jerked sideways. The horse bucked, sending the man tumbling into the dust. The other 2 kept coming. Jesse shouted from behind the cabin. Ma, they're circling. Elena's pulse pounded. Dust kicked up around the riders as they split. one sweeping left toward the corral, the other cutting right toward the cabin. Silas fired again. Missed. The rider on the left raised his rifle at midnight. No! Silas roared. He lunged from cover and sprinted straight into gunfire. The world blurred into gun smoke, sweat, and thunder. Elena grabbed Jesse's arm, dragging him and Ruth back inside the cabin. She shoved him behind the stove, threw her body in front of them, trying to breathe, trying to listen for Silas's voice, for anything, a shout, a gunshot, a horse screaming. She ran to the window. Silas had reached midnight and swung up bareback, the rein still tied to the rail. He ripped him free and kicked the stallion hard. Midnight reared, hooves slicing the air, then exploded forward toward the rider who'd aimed at him. Gunfire flashed. Silas ducked low against the horse's neck. Elena's heart lodged in her throat. Midnight barreled into the rider, knocking him clean off his horse. Silas leapt from the saddle mid-charge, tackling the man before he hit the dirt. The two rolled violently, fists flying, gun kicked aside. The last rider closing on them, rifle aimed. No, Silas. Elena's voice cracked, though she knew he couldn't hear her. Silas twisted, pulling the fallen rider into a headlock, using him as a shield. The rifle cracked. The bullet punched into the man Silas held. Silas didn't flinch. He grabbed the dead man's revolver and fired twice at the last rider. The horse stumbled. The rider fell. Silas staggered to his feet, chest heaving, blood soaking his sleeve. Not his own. He raised a revolver toward the fallen rider. But the man was already scrambling backward, crawling, terrified. Don't shoot. Don't shoot. Silas advanced slowly, every step heavy with a lifetime of hunted desperation. Elena burst in the cabin, running toward him. Silas, stop. He didn't hear her, or wouldn't. His hand shook. His eyes were glassy, far away, trapped in a memory she couldn't reach. Silas, she yelled again, grabbing his arm. His breath shuddered. The man on the ground whimpered, clutching his side. We were paid. Didn't know who you were. Swear it. Silas's jaw tightened. The revolver didn't lower. Silas, Elena whispered, stepping into his line of sight. Look at me. His eyes finally lifted to hers. Fear, fury, hurt, all of it tangled inside him. You ain't alone, she said softly. Silas's breath trembled. The revolver dropped. The rider scrambled to his feet and fled on foot, limping, disappearing over the rise. Silas closed his eyes, shoulders sagging. Elena touched his cheek gently. You didn't fall. He opened his eyes, voice raw. You're the only reason I didn't. Midnight trotted toward them, snorting softly, as if checking Silas was still alive. Jesse and Ruth ran from the cabin, throwing their arms around Elena's waist. The danger wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the moment, the land settled into a fragile, trembling quiet. Silas looked out toward the distant horizon, where the last rider had vanished. He'll tell others. Word spreads fast. Elena nodded. Then we prepare. Silas turned to her, eyes dark, haunted, yet steadier than they'd been in years. You keep making me stand, he murmured. I don't know how to do anything else anymore. Then we'll learn together, she answered. He swallowed hard, looking away, voice hollowed and honest. No one stood with me in a long, long time. Elena stepped closer, meeting his eyes. You're not running, Silas. Not anymore. The wind shifted again, brushing dust across their boots. And for the first time since arriving at the homestead, Silas didn't look over his shoulder. The wind had picked up across the plains, carried with the scent of dust, horse sweat, and gunpowder. Silas stood at the ridge, the sharp morning light cutting into the lines of his weathered face, his dark hair messy under his hat, coat flapping like a flag in the sudden gusts. His eyes, gray and stormed with both determination and the memory of past failures, scanned the horizon for movement. The ridge overlooked a narrow canyon, the only route anyone fleeing south would take. He had predicted the attackers would come this way. He had to be ready. Elena stood slightly behind him, her brown eyes narrowed, jaw tight, braided hair loose now, dust settling into folds of her faded dress. In her hands, she gripped a small, sturdy revolver. Ruth shivered beside her, clinging to her skirt, while Jessie stood just a step in front, pale but resolute, dark hair mussed, eyes alert. The children had witnessed enough violence to know fear was a tool, not a weakness. "They're close," Silas muttered, voice low, almost a growl. His hand hovered near the Colt at his hip. "Wait for my signal." Elena swallowed. She wanted to argue, to push the children out of danger, but she trusted him, as much as a woman could trust a man who had carried ghosts longer than he could count. He had saved them once already. He could do it again. From the canyon below, the first flashes of movement appeared. 3 riders, bandanas up, rifles ready, eyes cold and focused. Silas crouched, signaling the others to stay low. "Remember," he whispered, "one shot at a time. Don't get greedy." The wind whistled across the ridge, carrying the distant snort of horses and the crunch of hooves over rocky soil. Time seemed to stretch, a taut wire ready to snap. Silas counted each heartbeat. 1, 2, 3. A rifle cracked from below. Dust spiked into the air, kicking at Elena's boots. "Now!" Silas barked. Chaos erupted. Elena fired a single shot, the recoil jolting her arm, but the rider closest to the cliff dropped hard. Jesse's hand shook, but he aimed carefully and pulled the trigger. The second rider jerked sideways, screaming as horse and rider tumbled into a cloud of dust. Silas moved like a shadow, diving and rolling down the slope. His colt barked twice more. The last rider faltered, caught in a crossfire from Silas and Elena. Midnight, 10, the black stallion, reared near the edge, ears pinned, muscles coiled, ready to charge at any threat. The bond between man and horse was seamless, silent communication, an instinct guiding every motion. The battle escalated in seconds that felt like minutes. Dust, dirt, and gunfire filled the air, clinging to every surface, sticking to sweat-soaked skin. Silas had one attacker pinned against a rock, his revolver pressed to the man's temple. The rider spat, eyes wide with terror, but Silas's gaze never wavered. "I warned you," he muttered, voice like gravel. "Leave now or die here." The canyon fell silent after the last rider bolted, limping away, horseless. Elena dropped her gun. Shaking, hair plastered her forehead. Silas's chest heaved. He lowered the revolver slowly. Sweat ran down his temples, darkening the stubble along his jawline. He glanced back at the ridge. Elena, Ruth, and Jessie, relief mingling with exhaustion. "You okay?" Elena asked, voice trembling. Silas only nodded, eyes still scanning the horizon. "They won't be back immediately." Ruth tugged on Elena's skirt. "Ma, did he hurt them?" "No, baby," Elena whispered, brushing dust from her hair. "They're gone." Jesse wiped a smear of blood off his cheek. His young face hardened. "Are we safe now?" "For now," Silas said. His voice was quiet but firm. "But we can't stay here." Elena knew he was right. The ridge had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Every line on Silas's face told the story of men who hunted him relentlessly. He had survived before through skill, instinct, and luck, but luck ran thin in the frontier. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Then we move. Together." Silas looked down at her, the tension easing from his gray eyes. Just slightly. "Together," he murmured. By mid-afternoon, they had reached the narrow valley beyond the ridge. Sunlight slanted through clouds, pale and stark against the rocky walls. Silas scouted ahead while Elena led the children carefully through shallow brush, their boots crunching softly on gravel. The valley was tight, perfect for an ambush, but also for a last stand. The distant sound of hoofbeats made the blood in Silas's veins tighten. He pressed a finger to his lips. Elena crouched beside him, Ruth clutching her wrist, Jessie close at her side. They were out in the open now, no cover except for jagged rocks and sparse brush. Silas's eyes locked on the 3 riders approaching, their eyes hard under bandanas. "They want me," Silas said softly. "They'll take you if I falter. Don't leave my side, whatever happens." Elena nodded, heart pounding, as the riders closed in. The tension stretched into unbearable silence. Dust swirled, hooves hammered, and every muscle in Silas's body coiled for action. The first rider reached for his rifle. Silas fired. One down. The others charged, guns raised. Midnight appeared, rearing and snorting, ready to protect his master. Silas moved like a shadow again, firing precise shots, rolling, ducking, and using the terrain to his advantage. One attacker managed a shot, grazing Silas's shoulder. Pain flared, but he didn't falter. Elena fired again, steadying herself with Jesse and Ruth behind her. The second rider went down, horse stumbling into a rock. Dust and debris clouded the valley. Silas faced a final man, a towering figure, ruthless, with a scar across his left cheek. Their eyes met. Everything narrowed to the point between them. The gun, the stance, the quiet moment before life or death. "You'll stop chasing me today," Silas said, voice low but lethal. The man smirked. "You think one ridge, one fight can save you? You're mine." Silas fired. The bullet tore through the man's arm, sending his gun skittering across the stones. The attacker screamed, staggered, but pressed forward. Silas dove, tackling him into a shallow gully, fists and dirt mixing as the two men rolled violently. Elena watched, breath caught, heart pounding. Jesse gritted his teeth, holding Ruth close, trying not to flinch. Silas managed to pin the man down, his hand around the revolver, now aimed at the attacker's chest. "Leave," he growled, "and never come back." The man glared up at him, hatred in his eyes, but the pain and exhaustion were too much. With a final hiss, he scrambled to his feet and limped away, disappearing into the far edge of the valley. Silas slumped to one knee, breathing ragged, muscles trembling from adrenaline. Midnight nickered softly, brushing against him, ears forward. Elena rushed to him, helping him rise. "You did it," she said, voice choked. "You saved us." Silas shook his head. "We saved each other." Ruth and Jesse ran toward them, collapsing into Elena's arms. For the first time, the three of them, the family he had come to protect, felt a fragile sense of safety. But Silas's eyes remained on the horizon, ever watchful, haunted by the knowledge that the frontier would never truly be safe, that danger always lurked just beyond the ridge. And yet, for the first time in years, he felt something else. Hope. The walls he had built around his heart, his life, his trust, they were breaking down, not because the danger had ended, but because he had found people worth protecting. Together, they turned back toward the ridge, toward the cabin, knowing the world was still dangerous, but believing, finally, they could face it, not alone, not afraid, and with a bond forged in fire, blood, and unshakable courage.